When was the last time y'all looked at the modern metagame and saw a graveyard deck? Talking decks like Dredge or Reanimator, heck, Goryo's Vengeance still fits this mold. The central card in all these strategies is Faithless Looting, a card thought to be way too powerful for modern for so many years. Kinda died for Hogak's sins, but more recently a lot of folks thought that Endurance would be there to keep it in check. Notably now, like Splinter Twin, it's nowhere to be seen, and I wanted to explore that idea today. Look at where Faithless Looting is, why it might be there or not, and maybe get a good gauge on modern itself. Also, please subscribe or the next non-creature spell you're going to cast is going to get Spell Pierce and you will not have the mana to pay for it. Nikachu had a tweet from a bit ago as to saying what happened to Faithless Looting in modern, and honestly, fair enough. I have not thought about this card in a hot minute. Here I am trying to find answers to energy every time I play Mill. I'm thinking about how many board wipes should I play? Should I be playing 3 Crypt Incursion across 75? And I'm thinking like all of those cards actually do serve somewhat as like anti-graveyard stuff. Like the graveyard decks sometimes go wide, and so the board wipe can matter, and Crypt Incursion is just an all-encompassing anti-creature thing. But when it comes to Faithless Looting, it just doesn't exist in modern. I should say it is there at like the tier 2, tier 3 level, but it's not as powerful as many people thought. It has play in Pauper, it has play, heck, even in Legacy, but in Legacy, there's a bit more turboing out, there's more like fast mana and stuff. So Faithless Looting is at a different axis there. But in the formats it's legal in, it's just not seeing too much play in terms of modern. So we have to take a look at the ban announcement first. So December 16, 2024, again, rather recently, within the last 6 months, we had the unbanning of Mox Opal, Green Sun Zenith, Faithless Looting, and Splinter Twin. Now, Splinter Twin, we know at this point, has fallen off the face of the earth. The card is bad and has been for a very long time in a post-Modern Horizons world. It's been pretty bad. But when it comes to something like Faithless Looting, it's actually kind of surprising how bad this card is. And I think that is because of the Modern Horizonification of the format, because of energy. We haven't done anything about energy. And everyone is so worried about Mox Opal this, Mox Opal that. They just don't want to let combo exist. There are ways we can let combo exist. And even at this point, a really broken combo doesn't exist in modern. Ruby, Storm, and Belcher have a place in the modern metagame because energy sucks, generally speaking. It's not bad, but it generally sucks against combo strategies. Green Sun Zenith sees its play in Titan, and I mean, Titan is just going to keep going on as the best deck in modern that no one knows how to play, and so everyone just chooses not to address. But as long as Titan players are there, Mill players are there, so let's not touch Green Sun Zenith. Faithless Looting, though, is a weird one because, firstly, it brought about the return of Dredge. That was the big one that everyone was talking about. But more so, there was the kind of decks that, you know, the Reanimator style strategies. Goryo's Vengeance had a fun time with it, but also it had the Hollow One decks as well. So there are strategies now, and even there was strategies that use Faithless Looting. So where did they all end up? Because these cards see a varying level of play. Mox Opal arguably led to the banning of a deck. Again, Green Sun Zenith sees some play, Splinter Twin doesn't at all. So where's Faithless Looting in this whole equation? I mean, if you took a look at modern, did a quick like goldfish search the last little bit, Faithless Looting in the main board, we have a whole slew of things across the modern metagame. We have a whole spread. Initially, you have the Hollow One decks, and these decks actually do a really good job of using Faithless Looting to its maximal potential, because it's not just about throwing cards that you can reanimate into the graveyard, but it's also about enabling the namesake of the deck, Hollow One. And if we take a look at the deck list itself, this, to be fair, Hollow One is probably the more consistent representation of Faithless Looting that you're going to see in the modern metagame. You enter an average modern league, you will probably, on average, in my opinion, from my own personal experience, see Hollow One be the Faithless Looting representation. Marauding Mako is the more recent addition to this. No combat tricks, just cycling 2, but a permanent 1/1 buff before versus the other card that had Menace 1/2 and a temporary +1/+0 buff. The permanent 1/1 buff tends to be better. Putting Nethergoyce into the yard is really good. Fear of missing out as well to enable Delirium with the Faithless Looting. There's a lot of great options to include with just Tarfire. And so, of course, with the controlling package of Orcish Bowmasters, the speed of Detective Phoenix, and just the overwhelming power of free Hollow Ones, something like Faithless Looting in this strategy is a no-brainer. Especially post-board, when you draw Leyline of the Voids, having ways to pitch those away is really powerful. Just getting rid of your dead cards is a really powerful proposition when it comes to a Hollow One strategy. But the card itself isn't going to be the only thing this deck needs to get past energy and get past something like the Oculus decks, because a well-placed counterspell does stop a lot of this. Because a lot of these decks require some type of enabling engine, you're not going to be hard casting Hollow One. Of course, if you're grinding, you might, but you're going to need to resolve a Faithless Looting, a Burning Inquiry. So a lot of times a well-placed Spell Pierce can be really good. Graveyard Hate is actually relatively there. There are graveyard strategies out there, and so getting just blown out can really suck, and at that point you're just having to hard cast spells and pitch cards that you actually really need. So this deck does rely again on like prison pieces like Orcish Bowmasters, giving haste with Detective Phoenixes, and just going up and over top of maybe the flyers that something like Energy can provide. But again, Energy has so much life gain, it has so much mid-range power, that Faithless Looting isn't the card that's going to put this deck over the edge, although this deck can be really powerful because you have those games where you just run away with it in terms of Burning Inquiry. Sometimes you play the Burning Inquiry and your opponent is able to, your opponent is forced to drop all of the useful cards in that matchup, drop all their lands. It's happened on coverage. And so the high roll aspect of the Hollow One decks, the gambling focus of it, is going to be something that draws a lot of folks into playing it. And as an ex-Hollow One player, of course, you have your high highs and your low lows, but the deck consistent is not really what it's looking for, but Faithless Looting does help with its consistency. Again, as I mentioned, discarding some of its less useful cards. Now, Prized Amalgam is another one. Now, Prized Amalgam, Dredge is the conversation here. Now, I'm not sure if Dredge really has what it takes because of the axis that Dredge used to work with. Now, notably, Dredge does not play green anymore. You are not, or I should say usually, you are not playing the slow grind, conflagrate, put a bunch of lands in your hand with Life from the Loan type of Dredge deck. That's what it used to be. You used to Faithless Looting, get a bunch of cards out, you know, attack, and then all of a sudden you're grinding up to a giant conflagrate by, you know, casting something like a Life from the Loam. You draw into it 7 cards in hand, or maybe you go 8 cards in hand. Somehow you cast Life from the Loam, you go up to 9 cards in hand, and then all of a sudden you're like off to the right. Did I do that math right? Maybe I didn't. Whatever. It's 10 cards in hand, and then you conflagrate for red, discard a bunch, 10 your opponent, or just clear out their board. There is good options here. And even Dark Blast is actually really good in a world where honestly X1s and to some degree X2s, the way you do that is you Dark Blast on your upkeep, you then Dredge, and then you Dark Blast again. So there are ways to get around X2s, but there are a fair amount of X1s as well if you're thinking about the energy matchup. The problem is, again, this deck is having to be like a weird, like sometimes it's like this, but sometimes it's not. It's having to be a weird Dimir Reanimator deck. So you're noting that some copies of this deck, it doesn't show here, it's not represented enough. Some versions of this deck are playing Psychic Frog. In Legacy, Psychic Frog was used in the Reanimator strategies to solve the problem when you would draw your Reanimator target. And you'd have to use cards to get rid of those cards, you know, Thoughtseize yourself, whatever it might be, to put those cards back into your graveyard to be able to use. But Psychic Frog solved that problem by being a threat that was able to enable itself while solving that problem you had. And so Dredge is having to do this as well, to maybe put Ox of Agonis's in there. If you can't find your Faithless Looting, heck, even now, some decks aren't even running a full playset of Faithless Looting, which is blowing my mind. I will say Otherworldly Gaze does a pretty good job at setting some of this up, especially at instant speed. If you're realizing that you might want to Ox of Agonis, sometimes in those late games, you are going to be able to set things up to be able to like set up a Dredge as much as possible. Sometimes those numbers do matter, but regardless, the deck just isn't fast enough. The problem is you still have to beat Energy. There's no clear way to beat Energy here. Some of these versions are playing Wonder as a way to get over top, but you do have to get there. And sometimes if your opponent just has the insane start of, you know, the Guide of Souls and the Ajani, and then they play like the damn enchantment that sacrifice a creature ping, and then they play another, they play an Ocelot Pride. It's just like when they get the insane draws, or even the average draws, this deck just doesn't have it. You're having to use like Pyroclasms and stuff to be able to stop stuff like that. And so again, is it as fast as something like the Hollow One decks? Not at all. This deck still is looking to grind out with your opponent, and that is what's ultimately holding it back. The Hollow One decks have that speed, they have that surprise factor with the Phoenix just being able to get out and over top, give something haste. Dredge doesn't have that. It's still a slow roll deck. The Prized Amalgams come in tapped. Narcomoebas don't have haste. The creatures themselves are really middling and dumb. And so you're having to play this weird mid-range control package, whereas like even when you jump to Legacy, they have it solved because Legacy Dredge, even though maybe not top of the metagame, actually is like kind of a combo deck that can kind of do a mid-range plan as well, but really it's like a combo deck that has like almost an insta win like Thassa's Oracle line going on. You don't really have that with Modern Dredge. So without the combo angle, without a speed aspect to it, this deck's really not going to get anywhere when it comes to the top of the metagame. Last thing I wanted to mention is the Indomitable Creativity decks. This just provides an like another angle to get out like something like Archon of Cruelty. So obviously you have like a deck completely built around Archon of Cruelty, or I should say 2 win conditions. In the long game, it will lightning bolt you to death with something like Renin 6 and its ultimate, or it'll mid-range you out, creating copies of something like Archon of Cruelty. But really, those are its threats. It's the Archon and it's the Ren. If you go long, you have the Ren in 6, and then if you go short, you have the Archon of Cruelty, which you can creativity out. You can Faithless Looting, you put into your yard to persist. So on turn 1, you Faithless Looting, turn 2, you persist. And having an Archon of Cruelty just, you know, create that 6-point life differential, discard a card, like it does a lot. And so Faithless Looting is really good here. The problem with something like this is, again, it still doesn't solve the energy matchup. Our Archon of Cruelty, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, discards a card, and loses 3 life. You draw a card. Cool. The problem is, again, you create so much life gain. You create so many creatures. You attack with the Archon, they'll just sacrifice their Ajani and then flip the Ajani. The Archon can't even attack the Ajani because you already declared attacks. And so you've used all these resources to get out something like this. And yes, the deck does have angles. I'm not saying it's impossible to beat energy. I'm just giving you the average scenario. Can this deck beat the average energy scenario? It cannot. But it does have game. It can Faithless Looting, or on 1, it might be able to lightning bolt something early on, hold up other interaction, hold up the fatal push. It does have the removal for it. But the problem is energy has 1 mana remove anything. The damn O-ring effect that it has at 1 mana is insane. And so the removal package that is required to beat the top of the metagame right now, it's just too much. Like, you have to deal with also the prowess decks that are out right now, which are going to be lightning fast. The Eldrazi decks sometimes don't even care, right? Like, you're dealing damage to them. Yes, they have to sack a creature. Does that matter? They just play a giant Eldrazi and they just overwhelm you. They play Karn the Great Creator and they overwhelm you. They play something like the new Ugin and they overwhelm you. And to be fair, the Eldrazi decks aren't even using that Ugin like that well. Arguably, the Tron decks are using that Ugin better. But some of these decks just don't even care. And you play an Archon against, I don't know. I actually don't know how this deck consistently does much versus something like the Oculus decks. I feel like the Oculus decks control this deck very well, but I could be very wrong. That's not a matchup I have a lot of experience with. I'm just kind of reading it on paper. Regardless, another example of how Faithless Looting is possible. It has good angles. Archon of Cruelty resolving is just really good. It's just a really good creature out there on the battlefield. I just don't know if Faithless Looting is helping it get there over top. It does revitalize the strategy versus it being all in on creativity, and it gives it the persist angle, which is fair. It just doesn't have the speed. And I think the speed is the key, which is why Hollow One is still fine. Hollow One has that speed. Hollow One is able to use Faithless Looting to the speed that it wants to be. You know, it's not lightning skelemental, but it's still fast enough to be able to get there in some situations. And this is where we look at the modern metagame. We look at Faithless Looting. We look at combo at the top, Ruby Storm Belcher, Amulet Titan, Domain Zoo, Affinity. Even Domain Zoo and Affinity pretty fast, depending on how you build it. Mono Green Basking Brew, that is literally a combo deck. Is it prowess? Just super fast. Quarry Steel Cutter gives it some mid-range plan to be able to get up over top. Give Me Your Murktide is the mid-range tempo deck of choice. Eldrazi Ramp is the big mana deck of choice. And Boros Energy is just the single best deck in Modern right now by a mile. I don't know why we only ban the combo deck, but I don't want to spend another video yelling about Energy because look at where we're at with this damn percentage. Regardless, we're pretty much at the response. One of the responses is it doesn't go in Boros Energy. People talking about, yo, we got to put Quarry Steel Cutter in Boros Energy. No, it just doesn't go in Boros Energy. And that's the problem with Faithless Looting. So firstly, it doesn't synergize with any of the top cards in the metagame right now. But also, it doesn't give those cards, those metagame options, those other decks, any leverage over top of what's at the top of the metagame. The top of the metagame is arguably just a energy main board. It is exactly to where we were like when the One Ring was legal, right? The top 10 cards, almost that. Tamio is freaking everywhere. I mean, if you look at, I believe if you go down here, maybe I'm seeing it, but oh no, Endurance right here. Yeah. So not even the top 20, not top 10, not 30, not top 40 cards. Endurance is the most played card at 2.2 copies across the 75. There just isn't a lot of graveyard hate because they don't care about it. I mean, oh my God, if you resolve a Harbinger of the Seas against Dredge, like they're pretty cooked. Like they actually do rely on a lot of red. Subtleties in here, Psychic Frog, Soulless Jailer, I guess. Sowing Myco Spawn, Dragon. Yeah, not a lot of graveyard hate, Mage Bane specifically for the Storm matchup. But there aren't a lot of graveyard hate cards. That should also show you how much people do not respect that at all, because they don't need to. The main board plans are just good enough. And to be fair, the counter could be that on average in a league, people being underprepared for graveyards mean you could just snipe out a league. And that's pretty fair. It's going to be there. It's going to happen. But if you go all in on the graveyard and your opponent has that snipe piece and their main board plan is still just good enough, that's what energy is. The energy main plan is still just good enough. And then if you add the fact that they find their rest in peace, they find their one of sideboard card against you, you're cooked. You're not going to get there. And so therein lies the ultimate problem with something like Faithless Looting. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know if you think Faithless Looting can ever make a comeback in the modern metagame right now. Let me know what card it's like. What are we missing for Faithless Looting to get back? Are we needing to unban Golgari Grave Troll? I don't know if we need to do that because it's green and it pitches to Force of Vigor. There's a lot of considerations you need to make when you bring in cards like that. I'm not sure if it's unbanned that, but maybe it's at a time when graveyards just aren't that great. Maybe we just need to revisit a plane that's going to hypercharge graveyards and something brings back Dredge in a big way. And if it does, I'm going to be happy for it. I wanted to get everyone in some deep propaganda to bring back Dredge so that Modern Mill can have another great matchup at the top. For now, that is going to be the video for today. As I mentioned, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know how y'all are feeling about Modern as a metagame in total. Let me know how you're faring against the Energy Menace.